All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for being with us today. So today I'm going to be talking about kind of some global dialogues on AI, a COIL project. So my colleague Mingjung So and myself have been doing a collaborative online international learning program for 6 years, going on 7 now here at SUNY Oswego. This is the first year that we've kind of changed the topic to AI and how this plays a role in health promotion and wellness and in our field and internationally. So a little bit about kind of our COIL experience. So like I said, we've been doing this for 6 years, and each semester we always kind of change up the topics that we're covering. So we do call this program Health Promotion Across Borders, and it is a COIL. So we're partnered with students from the Netherlands, specifically the Hague University of Applied Sciences. And these are students that are in their nutrition and dietetics program. And we've been working with their institution for many, many years now. And the topics we've covered over these 6 years that we've done COIL here at SUNY Oswego with the Hague have been everything from physical activity, where we've had students compare perspectives on exercise and health between the two cultures here in the US and the Netherlands, everything from nutrition, discussing healthy diets, eating habits across cultures, mental health, which had a critical focus during the COVID and after the COVID-19 pandemic, exploring mental well-being across countries. And this year we've taken it to AI as being a part of many of our reading groups. Like a lot of you here, we know that AI is something that's evolving rapidly. And we also know that it is being intertwined and kind of aligned in particularly health promotion and wellness in the medical fields. So it's very important that our students know the skills and they are literate in AI. So this year, our topic was AI leveraging technology for international health promotion. So that's what I'm going to talk a little bit about today and kind of how we did this and kind of wove it into our COIL experience that we've been doing over the years. So this COIL project introduced different types of AI tools, and this was the critical component of what we wanted students to learn. Many of the students were I say first year in our terms, but it's not the same in the Netherlands, but they were students just starting out in their higher education. And in the Netherlands, particularly the Hague University, all of their incoming students have to do COIL courses every semester. So they're always consistently doing some intercultural engagement, whether it's in person or virtually. So we really wanted them to experiment with AI tools, and the instructor, Maria Vandersloot, that we worked with at The Hague, was also really excited because this is something that they have not really explored yet within their discipline. It's not something students are really aware of in the sense that they don't see it as much being used. There's not really been a lot of conversation about it yet. So this was really important to kind of put this forward for this program. So we had them use AI as kind of the critical component that was kind of new and innovative for this project, and really to help them understand the relevance and the growing relevance, the ever evolving relevance in the health and wellness field. So we know that as technology becomes increasingly embedded in our public health practice, our students as future professionals, they need to be AI literate and also comfortable using these technologies, not only being able to use them, but in an ethical manner and an informed manner moving forward if they want to be, eligible for certain types of positions. So throughout the project, we really kind of helped students learn that AI can support them and also their health promotion efforts in different ways. For example, helping them summarize and interpret public health research more efficiently than before. Also, we used it in a way that they could kind of identify different trends and patterns in lifestyle behaviors across cultures. And you'll get to see some insight in some of the work that the students produced using AI in these categories. Also, enhancing communication. A lot of the Dutch students actually used AI to help them with translation. And also, because they're encouraged to kind of practice their English in this regard, and vice versa with our students kind of learning with translation. So using it also as a communication tool, but they also use some kind of presentation tools for health education with AI as well. So overall, kind of what happens in our COIL project is our students are meeting with a partner. They're paired up with a Dutch student to our US student. And this takes place in our HSC 448 program planning course in health promotion. And they're having virtual exchanges. And these virtual exchanges are them and their partner really working together and creating ideas, innovative kind of programs and implementations surrounding physical activity and nutrition in our field. So it really was a project that wasn't about relying on AI to do the work, but more about the students learning how to work with AI in a thoughtful, collaborative, critical, and applied way that kind of can align with the demands of modern health promotion workforce right now. So that was what was really cool. And it really helped with supporting that cross-cultural comparison. Students started making more data-informed decision-making. It provides some great effective health messaging by kind of running it by AI. And it was a great way for them to kind of have this experience virtually and have a tool that can help them. So how did we kind of apply this as the instructors? So Mingjung So and myself, as well as Maria Vandersloot from the Hague University, we really talked about what are the things we want to have the students use AI for. And some of the basic things when we started kind of creating the course and this type of project for the semester was really having them understand and really focus more on compared guidelines, right? So the two different countries and doing comparisons, whether that's creating tables or charts or things like that, based on what the students are meeting and gathering together in their virtual experiences. So they really used AI, particularly a lot of students used ChatGPT, but we had students using Gemini, we had students using Claude, we had students using Notebook LM, lots of different things. So I'm going to show a little bit of those too. But they were using it in a way to extract and compare both dietary and physical activity guidelines from the US and the Netherlands. They were given 2 readings about the different countries and the nutritional guidelines and the physical activity guidelines. And they used ChatGPT and Gemini or Claude to take what they talked about together as a group and compare it into a table. Right? So they were doing some visuals that they were creating. So not only that, they were doing things such as like tables or charts that really highlighted the similarities and differences based on what the students were inputting, what they were talking about. So the students were using it as a tool to kind of create more innovative images based on what they were already having conversations about in their virtual meetings. They also used it to kind of deeper analyze cultural contexts. So they input a lot of their own personal observations, some from their partner interviews, and some even visual data, or a lot of students didn't feel comfortable like putting their own visual data in, which they weren't required to. But what they did was they would tell AI what the visual they took a photo of was. And then AI would spit back out a type of image that kind of looked like that, right? Without having them having to share exactly their own images. So that was really cool to see. And I'll show you some of the things that they created as well. It also helped them when thinking about these cultural contexts to really kind of detect trends in the different countries and these contextual influences about how they impact our influences differently in the US versus the Netherlands, and also movement habits. So as some of you may know, the Netherlands, they're very active. They bike everywhere. So driving to their classes or driving to work is kind of unheard of for the Dutch students. So it was really interesting to see what they came up with as groups for their tables and charts with AI. But they also then connected this to behavior and environment. So we looked at some of our behavioral theoretical frameworks. One particularly that the Netherlands uses a lot more than we do. It's known as the Angelo framework. So we introduced the US students more to the Angelo framework, and also the Dutch students were introduced to our theory of planned behavior. So we kind of showed them that in different countries, there's different types of frameworks. AI really helped break that down for students to really understand quickly what this framework was and kind of help support their analysis, and how the Angelo framework kind of gave us some guidelines for the built environment, economics, cultural norms, impact on our food choices, physical activity levels, and things like that. So it was helpful in connecting kind of some rich, I like to say, harder or more complex literature that students may not really be able to understand. It was able to break it down easier for them to make those connections. And ultimately, the final outcome of kind of applying it in these ways, students really transformed kind of raw data that they came up with, and also data from their readings and their personal experiences into actionable insights that then helped kind of create a clearer picture of global health behavior through kind of an AI enhanced lens. And I think that's really key, because a lot of what our students were doing, it was their conversations, their photos, their observations, their raw data, but using AI in a way to more effectively display that messaging, more effectively or professionally display the messaging. And I think that was really cool for students to see that I can use this to enhance, but it's my work, right? So that was really cool. So some of the things that we noticed that students really started to gain was not only health literacy, but AI literacy, really interpreting more effectively and efficiently those scientific studies that notoriously have been really hard and complex for our students to understand based on kind of the jargon. If you've ever read an American medical journal, sometimes it's hard to decipher different things. This was really helpful for students to be like, oh, this is what they're saying, right? In addition, there was a lot of recommendations that students were seeing AI was giving them in regards to dietary guidelines, so nutrition plans, physical activity recommendations. You know, AI came up with a lot of really innovative, thoughtful ideas that students may not have always thought about. So it kind of helps them think a little bit deeper about some of the skills and tools they know from the classroom, and expand and broaden kind of their thoughts, and when they're making their own nutrition plan or for a client, what that could look like. So it helped break down that complex language, but it also helps students understand why AI is ever evolving, why we use it in the health field, where it's going in the health field. And I feel like they really got that basis of being able to use the tool and learning how to kind of do better inputs and prompts for AI to get better outputs, right? So this really strengthened their ability overall with health information, and also being able to apply it to real world settings, not only in the US, but if they were to have a job internationally in the Netherlands or with Dutch clients. Digital skills, always when we're doing the COIL, I think this is always kind of a big enhancement we see with the students, but particularly with this one, the various AI tools they were experimenting with. And I say that also exploring with, a lot of the students added things onto the assignments because they were like, wow, this is actually really cool. I learned this, right? So they really gained experience in navigating these kind of emerging technologies, even though they've been around for a long time, they're just ever evolving, but applying them in specifically a public health context. So this is really essential for our students coming out into what we now call this modern health promotion workforce, and really making them more marketable, I think, when it comes to jobs based on kind of having these skills. Lastly, the kind of cross-platform communication. So in addition to using different types of AI tools, the students were sharpening their skills with basic kind of digital communication, such as Zoom. They were doing a lot of, excuse me, Zoom virtual meetings. We also had students, we did our icebreaker through Padlet, and we've kind of kept the Padlet for all those 6 years. So you can see all of the students who've collaborated over the years, which is really cool. They were doing a lot with Google Drive and a lot with Microsoft. So one challenge our students needed to learn a little bit more. They do Google for everything. The students at the Hague University are a Microsoft campus, so Microsoft Forms and those types of things. So the students here in the US had to kind of transition a little bit away from their Google Drive and get more experience in some of those other areas for kind of content collection and stuff like that. But I think this ultimately is great for them to learn, because not everywhere is going to have the same digital skills or whatever it is, and just preparing them more for those remote or those international work environments if they were going on to a job in a different country. So some of the COIL assignments here, they're all embedded links, and we have our collaborative syllabus, the Padlet icebreaker, and the kind of 4 key assignments that the student did. Now, throughout all of these sessions, they were having virtual meetings with their partners. We had a full meeting with both institutions, with all the students, where they met each other via Zoom. They went into breakout rooms and they were able to meet their partners and have discussions and introduce themselves. And then we really had assignments where they were breaking down who they were, what their passions were, then using AI to analyze and compare global health behaviors. Assignment 3, they were looking then at culture, environment, and lifestyle, and they used AI here. And kind of the final collaborative video, which interestingly enough, a lot of students chose to use Notebook LM and create kind of a podcast of their combined work. So that was something that was really interesting and neat as well. So with assignment 1, the purpose of this assignment was really to have them build a rapport, meet their international partner, really become, confident in their discussions and their communication. And the AI integration in this assignment really focused on that interpersonal exchange. So we really wanted them to first assignment, build those kind of digital literacy skills, but also create and share meaningful photos or conversations about each other to really kind of break the ice and get them, building that rapport as their partner for the rest of the semester and for their assignments. So they were encouraged to explore and experiment with AI and photo creation in this About Us. We did have some students from the Netherlands that didn't want to kind of share their photos of themselves. So they actually used AI to create photos of themselves. They would basically put in, this is what I look like, generate an image that looks like me. And one of those groups, one of our students actually was like, I'll do the same thing. And they actually were able to create like avatars in a sense, which looked like this. So they used some avatar tools, Dolly, where they didn't want to share their real photos. So they created like digital self-portraits based on their written descriptions. So I thought it was kind of neat. One of our students' favorite color, hobby. So again, it's an introduce yourself assignment where they're creating slides for their final video about who they are and introducing themselves first as partners. And it was really cool to see how AI actually then created who they were based on them actually putting in the content of their self-portraits. So this one came out more of like an avatar-y, and this one kind of was more realistic. The student had mentioned in the reflection that, a little different, but for the most part, they could see where their written description created this, right? The images also created from AI showed the painting, and also, I believe she said this looks like an area close to, I forget what she said in the reflection, close to campus or something, and there's actually a lot of health and wellness facilities over here or something. So it was kind of interesting. So they used image prompts to really produce these visuals of themselves and also their hobbies and foods. So that was a really cool way for them to experiment and know that AI is more than just, getting a text response. There's so much more that you can do with it based on what you give it. So the second assignment, kind of the purpose of this one, was really to deepen their understanding about public health issues. So major public health issues that are not only happening in the United States, but globally, in the Hague University as well. And with their partner, really kind of looking at these major issues and using AI tools to really kind of deepen their understanding of behavioral frameworks. So for example, the theory of planned behavior. How could this theory then be applied to nutrition and physical activity in the Netherlands or in the US? They discussed together as students. They had some readings that they had to do. And then after discussing that framework with those international partners, they then experimented with structured prompts. In particularly, we had them use ChatGPT. Some other students used Gemini or Claude, whatever they felt comfortable with. And we wanted them to generate an organized table of what their discussion was. So what are the differences in each country using that framework of the theory of health behavior? What's happening in the Netherlands with nutrition and physical activity versus here in the US, and give a comparison table. So they experimented with how to structure prompts in ChatGPT or Claude to then get an output where they had a summarized table with key components, definitions, or cultural applications. So it really encouraged them to test out how to do a good prompt and influence kind of that final output clarity, I guess, around the content, which also made them have to critically think, because whatever they were putting in, they could tell if it was not correct as it came out, right? So this was a way for them to create other types of visuals, explore how then the behavior change theory really can be applied across contexts. So here we had students, rather than just reading the two different articles that they read about, global health behaviors in the Netherlands and the US, they then, two of our students used ChatGPT specifically to generate side-by-side theory table. So they asked AI to create a visual analogy to help make sense of the theory of health, or the theory of planned behavior. So they put in their reflection, they had to share what their exact prompts were and showcase what they got out of it. So this group was create a visual metaphor for the theory of planned behavior that could help a high school student understand how it applies to eating habits in the US and the Netherlands. So this group was specifically targeting, their priority population was high school students. So if you see here, they had their conversations about 3 of the components of the theory of planned behavior. They gave examples from the US in regards to these. What are the attitudes, in the US regarding, food? What are the subjective norms? Those 2 types of things, and the Netherlands example as well. So you can see here in the US, the student said, the attitude is really, I should eat less fast food. Their subjective norm is, my friends eat a lot of fast food and they eat it often. And their perceived control is, okay, healthy food is expensive or inconvenient, right? So what's kind of the reasoning or the action being taken for whatever reason? Then we look at Netherlands. The attitude was, I actually prefer fresh, home cooked meals. Subjective norms, everyone's biking and eats meals at home. And then lastly, there are grocery stores close to their house, perceived behavioral control that can help them take better action. And you'll note here, it's all spelled pretty good, except I just noticed a spelling error here. I had some students say they would get their kind of visual table and it would look great. But then if they added like any infographic or something like that, it wasn't as great. The more that they started working with it, it got a little bit more jumbled. But this is exactly what we wanted to see, them critically thinking about what they would put in, but it's based on their own conversations that they were having in the group setting. So assignment 3 was culture, environment, and lifestyle. So really the purpose of this one was for them to explore kind of the built environment, right? So how does the built environment in the Netherlands shape their health behaviors and vice versa here? So the AI integration here was students, again, capturing original photos or videos of their local environment, grocery stores, parks, food advertisement, walking past. They shared those in their partnered Zoom meetings. Then they used AI tools to kind of analyze the themes they discussed and also analyze the visuals. Now, they needed to tell AI what those visuals were. Some people actually put their visuals in there, some didn't want to. So kind of they made it work on what they felt comfortable with. And it actually started to identify a lot of environmental factors influencing not only obesity, but also activity levels in both countries. And then going back to frameworks, we were then kind of tasked with allowing our US students to really take on a framework that's more common in the Netherlands, such as the Angelo framework, to really help them understand with kind of some AI generated insights after they read some complex public health literature. So how they used it, how it came out. I think it came out really well. A lot of students were a little worried about it because the Angelo framework's not something that they have really been taught in our field yet, because we're more so health belief model, stages of change, socio-ecological model. So this was very new to them. But again, in their conversations, the students were talking, breaking down kind of the constructs of the framework, gave examples, both Netherlands, US, and talked about the impact. They then took their notes, told AI, this is what we talked about, put it in a well-organized table, and they got this wonderful output, very short and sweet and concise, based on what their meetings and their conversations were. So as you can see here, there was a lot of thought put into what they were talking about, like limited sidewalks, healthy foods. And again, each reflection for the assignments, the students had to tell us what they put in as a prompt. So they're not just getting an output and we don't know what they were telling it. They clearly were having really engaged discussions about their examples and what those impacts on health behaviors were. And they got some really great visuals that could be really helpful in program planning, implementation, evaluation, which is really core in both of our fields. They also were able to create visuals. So you'll see here the Angelo framework, the environmental differences. A lot of roads in the Netherlands, you're not going to see cars traveling on them. They're meant for bikes, as opposed to looking at the US. We have roads. We also have telephone lines. We have houses next to each other, particularly in New York State, right? In the Oswego area. So this group talked about how their Dutch city park reflected a built environment designed for movement, with an infrastructure that supports cycling and walking, aligned with their national wellness policies as a country. In contrast, students talked about kind of the suburban street here in the US, which reveals limited walkability. So we have some crosswalks, right? Or some sidewalks and infrastructure. So it kind of discourages daily physical activity and reflecting a culture of car reliance that we all know about, and time-saving behaviors, more about time saving than taking that time for movement as in the Netherlands. And this whole little frame here, the students got this as an output from AI. This group used ChatGPT. They put in their own photos. These were their photos. So this actually is a street in Oswego somewhere. And gave it to ChatGPT, and ChatGPT actually spit back out this little slide with the summary based on their conversations. So that was a really cool kind of output they received. So then assignment 4 was this final collaborative video. And originally when we started, it was to be a video. I had a group that had about 4 students in it. It was 2 SUNY Oswego students and 2 Netherlands students, and they wanted to test out podcast, right? And one of the students had been looking at different types of things. I think they started with something else. Is there another, John, type of software that does podcasts that's AI other than Notebook LM? I forget the name.
There is another Google one, but
yeah,
it's much, well, it's more tweakable, but it's not quite as flexible.
Yeah, because the group started out with something else and then they went with Notebook LM. But they did ask, hey, can we experiment with something other than just, a final video? And I said, of course, anything that you're wanting to experiment with. And they wanted to use Notebook LM, which they can't actually use. The Netherlands students or the Hague students were fine with using it. They were able to, but our students, it's blocked with our Oswego email address, but they were able to use their own personal one. So we did have students create a podcast with Notebook LM. They put in their previous work and assignments where they actually talked about the cultural differences, analyzing the different frameworks, and ultimately what their final recommendations were for each country in regards to moving forward. What do we need to do in regards to nutrition and physical activity? Created a really cool podcast centered around those topics. And it actually, they put in, make it short and sweet because we didn't want the videos to be too long. So it was about 4 minutes, and it really synthesized their findings in a real creative way. And they put in some comments. They showed kind of how they prompt Notebook LM. There's something in there where you can add, make sure to highlight this or something before you do that. So they shared how they used it, how they were able to prompt it a little bit, and that was great. So really what we saw was this co-creation of some did a final video, some did podcast, where they were doing cultural comparisons, sharing their health promotion goals, reflections on what they learned. Now, the ones that did do the video, they were able to share more of their images that they created versus the podcast. They talked more about it, but that was okay because we had their assignments where we saw those anyway. But ultimately, some of them even used for the video AI to help them script draft what they were going to say, because a lot of them did a narration on the back end and help them with like a storytelling structure. Because one year we did something with photo voice, which could have been really cool, and using AI to kind of support that. But also even voiceover, subtitle suggestions. There was a lot of cool things that it helped different groups with. And again, like I said, Notebook LM, that podcast style outcome was used. And I think ultimately throughout these 4 assignments, it really demonstrated how AI can enhance not only digital health communication tools that are used in real world scenarios and education, but also advocacy settings in our field. These are great ways to really do mass communication in a way that can really help advocate for major public health issues in our societies. So overall, we had a great kind of final outcome there. So the broader implications. So what this means for kind of global health education. And actually a student created this using ChatGPT. And it was the beginning of their actual video that they had created. So ultimately, the broader implications that we found as we were moving through was this really is AI is really an impactful tool for inclusive health promotion. When used in a way where you're prompting it in a way that is inclusive, et cetera, and how to do that, I think for the students, a lot of, I think the images that were created were inclusive. Students became very aware when they were getting images that solely were one race or et cetera. So they were really starting to see certain ethical implications and be able to put in the content to make sure that they're getting inclusivity. But also importance of student-to-student international learning. We always see this with COIL, but I think particularly for our discipline and probably many other disciplines outside of the health field, this would be wonderful for. But we're noticing a lot of AI use, generative, AI in health promotion, public health, telemedicine, telehealth, your doctor's offices. These are being used more and more, and they're becoming more and more effective, more and more efficient. So it's important for our students to understand those if they're coming out of this field, having some sort of awareness of that. And also how this model, was how they were able to model or scale or even evolve in regards to other campuses, other types of health topics. Where do we lie as US citizens? Where does the Netherlands lie? What are the things that each country could change to kind of further scale or evolve, health, but also maybe use technology, right? So I think a lot of students came to that realization with this project. So some of the quantitative outcomes, and we haven't really dove into everything yet because we did do a pre-post test survey. So this is just some of the perceptions, because we also have self-efficacy. We're also looking for a lot of things when we do our COIL project, but overall, the perceptions, when we're thinking about kind of a collaborative online international learning experience, we want our students to gain cultural competency. We want them to be more culturally aware, culturally sensitive, because these are the populations, clients, people that they're going to be working with, right? They're going to be working anywhere in the United States. It could be outside of the United States, and making sure that they are aware and they have cultural competence is really important. So doing a COIL project kind of gives them the sense of how to kind of refine those skills. So as you can see here in green, we have the students that strongly agreed or agreed. Neutral was our yellow, and red was our disagree and strongly disagree. So we have a lot of variation. In every semester we do, but you can see that a lot of the students did agree with many of these statements. So if we look at new outlook on global perspectives, many students agreed and strongly agreed that they did get new outlook on global perspectives. We look at, change the way I act, not so much. I mean, it was a short a short project. I think it's a semester long, right? And I'm assuming if we followed them, we could see if anything like that did change. But, just having those experiences, I think, kind of helps students see in a different perspective. Change perception on another culture. Most students strongly agreed and agreed. Skills and knowledge that they'll use. A lot of students agreed with that as well. This was new knowledge. Positive impact on their career. A lot of people found the value in that as well. And then this also gave students kind of an increased interest in study abroad, which we often get, most students after saying they really want to do that. And we find that doing a COIL project where there is no additional cost, they get that experience, they get excited about it. A lot of students may want to go on, but it's also just equitable, right? For students who may not get the option to go study abroad, they can have the experience of a COIL. So these were just some of the brief student perceptions overall. More of a qualitative feedback was about AI. Some of the main overarching themes, AI as an organizational tool. So I saw a lot of students saying, okay, I've never used AI before, but I see how I can put my own ideas or my own work, and it can help organize this, right? And some of those subcodes that came out of this were synthesizing that cultural information or structuring project content. They gave it those ideas, right? They were the ones doing the critical thinking, and it helps them kind of organize the two different countries, the two different cultures, the different ideas, the different examples, and helped organize them for them. And some quotes that went with this was, that AI was very helpful to put a lot of information about cultural differences all in one place and do it organized, right? Another main theme was developing AI comfort and confidence. There was a lot of different quotes of students saying, I can work better with AI now. I definitely use it as a tool. I will definitely use it as a tool moving forward. And I love that they said as a tool, right? Because again, the students were really good about using it in a way where, they're putting in the prompts, it's their ideas, their work, and it was a tool for them to become more refined in something or really help organize or make something a little bit more professional. Some subcodes that came out of that was improved ability to use AI, and also saying that they were going to use it moving forward. And then another main theme was limited AI use or uncertainty. So we did have students that were still a little uncertain. The AI guidance was available, but they may have underused it. There was a few groups where I wonder if they did even use AI. It was interesting. They're a little uncertain as to, I'm not going to use this, or I'd rather learn more in this way. This isn't helping me learn. We did get a few of those. Someone had said, I don't feel as though AI was really utilized for our assignments. I would love to really understand more about how to properly use AI. So there was a couple groups where there was some strong perceptions in there about not using AI that kind of led to this quote where somebody really did want to use it and really would like to learn it and do it in their own. So there was still some students that had some uncertainty with it. Particularly the Dutch students, this isn't something that they have learned in their courses. I don't think it's overly talked about at the moment. So a lot of that uncertainty was from quite a few of our Dutch students, but also really thankful for learning a little bit more about this because they understand it's a big topic, moving forward, in our field particularly. And that is it. Any questions? Do you have any questions, John?
No, sounds good.
So thank you, everyone. If you do have any questions, you can always reach out to me. Mingjung and I, like I said, have been doing this for a long time, and we really enjoy kind of that cross collaboration with with different cultures, especially Netherlands. So if you are interested in doing a COIL project or how to get started with that, you can always reach out to us. Thank you.